Welcome to the deep dive. So you've given us this really fascinating set of sources on ceremonial magic. We're looking at Arthur E. Waite's Book of Ceremonial Magic. Then there's the Grimoire of Arthur Gauntlet, and also some writings from Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, it's quite a mix.
It is, and it can feel like a lot to wade through. So our goal here is really to jump in, pull out the genuinely interesting stuff, and give everyone a shortcut to understanding what these texts are actually about. Maybe find a few surprises.
Exactly. Think of it as a journey, really, through quite different viewpoints on magic. We've got historical analysis, practical spell books, and then Crowley's very unique take.
Right.
We want to get to the core of how ceremonial magic is presented in these specific texts, look at the history behind them, the kinds of rituals involved, and importantly, the different ideas about whether any of it works and, what the point of it all is supposed to be.
Okay, good plan.
Yeah.
So let's kick things off with Arthur E. Waite. He uses this term, transcendental magic. Sounds very lofty.
It does, doesn't it? But he clarifies it's more of a standard term for that time, maybe something like what Eliphas Levi called haute magie.
Okay.
But what grabs you straight away is just how skeptical Waite seems about the whole thing.
Right. He doesn't hold back.
No, he really doesn't. He compares the supposed high-mindedness of this magic to, well, modern spiritualism of his day, seances, mediums, that kind of thing, and suggests that any sort of intelligences contacted through these rituals often reveal themselves as fantastic or frivolous, his words. It's a pretty dismissive start.
Yeah, it definitely sets a tone. It makes you wonder what's driving that skepticism. Maybe just the rationalist thinking of the era.
Could be partly that. He also hints that the magic we find written down in books, the grimoires, might actually be seen by some practitioners as a watered-down version, or even corrupted.
Oh, interesting, like a debased travesty.
Exactly, or a diluted application, as he puts it, as if there's some secret, more authentic magic that isn't written down anywhere.
Which is kind of intriguing in itself.
It is. And interestingly, Waite suggests these written rituals might actually be, quote, more innocent because they are more ridiculous.
Because they're absurd.
Yeah, and often impossible to actually perform as written. He almost implies their absurdity as a saving grace, which leads him to his distinction between white and black magic.
Yes, the idle versus the evil word.
Precisely. For him, it seems to boil down to intention and the potential for harm. Very moralistic.
So he's basically saying all the existing rituals he's looking at are, quote, tainted with black magic. Pretty strong stance.
Very strong. And then he starts diving into specific books. First up is The Arbitel of Magic.
Right. What does he say about that one?
He points out its focus seems to be on achieving practical things, tangible results. Like there's an example about making yourself to be worshipped as a god using the sigil of a spirit named Ach.
Wow, okay. That sounds ambitious.
Doesn't it? And Waite contrasts this sharply with someone like Eliphas Levi, who emphasized that magical power comes through, hard work, perseverance, inner development.
So a clash between natural magic versus art-based magic.
Exactly that tension. Is it about inner change or external techniques? Waite clearly sees the Arbitel as leaning heavily on the art, the techniques, and he seems to view that as less legitimate, maybe more open to misuse.
Okay. Then there's the Enchiridion of Pope Leo. That sounds religious.
Well, the story behind it does. Legend says Pope Leo III gave this collection of prayers to Charlemagne for protection. Sounds very pious.
But Waite sees it differently.
He does. He argues that despite the legend, the content isn't really about simple devotion. It's more like a collection of charms disguised as prayers.
Yeah, okay. Focused on worldly stuff.
Exactly. Getting earthly advantages, protection, success, rather than fostering genuine spiritual growth. He sees it as sort of hijacking religious forms for magical ends, putting it at odds with, the true spirit of the church in his view.
Interesting how those lines could blur. What about the really famous ones, like the Key of Solomon?
Right. The Key of Solomon the King and the Lesser Key, also known as the Lemegeton. Waite mentions there's uncertainty about the printed versions we have, maybe connections to an older text called Sefer Raziel.
And the structure of the Lesser Key itself is pretty wild, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. It's broken down into sections. You've got Goetia, dealing with infernal spirits.
Okay.
Then Thurgia Goetia, spirits of the cardinal points. Pauline art for angels of the hours. And Almadel, with 4 choirs of spirits. It's quite a system.
And Waite's take.
He emphasizes how much detail the Goetia part gives about the powers of these, infernal spirits. loads of detail there, but comparatively little about the benefits you might get from the higher angelic intelligences.
So, wait, that imbalance points towards...
Towards black magic in his framework, magic focused on darker forces or perhaps more self-serving goals.
The polling art and Olmedal sections, do they give specifics?
They do. You get names of spirit rulers like Vakmiel, Sezquiel, Samiel, each supposedly commanding legions of lesser spirits. And in the Almadel, there's a specific prayer for calling on angels that uses these powerful divine names, Adonai, Helamai, Pine.
So, invoking God's names to command angels.
That seems to be the idea, leveraging a higher authority, you could say, to interact with these angelic beings within this very structured hierarchy.
Then he moves on to the really infamous Grimoires, right?
Grimorium
Verum.
Yes, Grimorium Verum, the Grimoire of Honorius, the Grand Grimoire. He describes the Grimorium Verum's setup preparing tools, special parchment, evoking Lucifer, Beelzebub, Astaroth.
Feels pretty dark.
It does. Although Waite notes that despite maybe seeming repulsive, its core logic isn't necessarily less coherent than some earlier texts. And he points out its enduring popularity, its reprint history, connections to the Red Dragon Grimoire. These books clearly resonated with people seeking practical magic.
And they contain instructions for talismans.
Oh yes, very specific instructions, like a violet satin talisman embroidered with silver whisper nitre rado u sunandum into it, hold it to your ear, and it supposedly reveals secrets.
Wow.
Another one, grayish-white satin, gives command over infernal legions if you use the words Ostherimen, Visantiperos, Noctator. The level of detail is incredible.
It really suggests this idea that physical objects can hold power through symbols and words.
Absolutely. They're focal points for intent, believed to create a tangible link to the desired magical effect or entity.
And the rituals themselves sound demanding. Prayer before starting, fasting.
Strict rules for fasting, methods for calculating planetary hours based on sunrise and sunset, changing day length.
Planetary hours, right.
Even the aspersing and fumigation rituals in Grimorium Verum have exact incantations, and they use both fragrant perfumes and foul-smelling ones, plus an exorcism of the lighted coals.
This whole sensory experience almost.
Very much so. The prayer sets the stage, fasting purifies, planetary hours align with cosmic time, scents create atmosphere, exorcisms clear the space. It's all part of creating the right conditions.
Waite also maps out the spirit hierarchies mentioned in these books.
Yeah, he does. Lucifer, Beelzebub, Astaroth at the top, then various inferior spirits ranked below them, each with their own sigil or seal.
Like an organizational chart from, well, the underworld.
Pretty much. He gives examples like Citrus, who makes people fall in love, Belith, a powerful king spirit, Boon, who grants riches and wisdom. Each has their supposed specialty. The sigils are like their calling cards.
And summoning them involves these forceful conjurations.
Very forceful.
Yeah.
The third conjuration he details lists a whole string of divine names, Donai, Pre-Ray, Tetragrammaton, and includes threats of punishment if the spirit disobeys, like being cast into the bottomless pit.
Intense. And that forked rod in flames.
Yeah, supposedly a last resort if the spirit is stubborn. Very dramatic imagery. These conjurations are all about establishing dominance, using sacred authority to compel obedience.
But it's not always one-sided.
Yeah.
You mentioned Lucifer Adrafical demanding payment.
Exactly. That example shows the spirit might have its own conditions or demands. It wasn't always just the magician dictating terms. There are direct conjurations to Lucifer as well.
And finally, Waite covers necromancy, conjuring the dead.
He touches on it, yes. Describes a ritual using a magic wand, specific words like barreled, bulbin, and then a particularly grim ritual for spirits of suicides.
Oh, what did that involve?
St. John's wort, an owl's head owls, often being associated with night and death, and a unique conjuration invoking Hecate, a goddess often linked with the underworld and witchcraft.
Definitely a darker side of magic.
But for sure, it focuses on communication with the deceased, using symbolic items and places linked to death.
So after reviewing all this, Waite's final verdict is pretty harsh, isn't it?
It really is. He basically dismisses it all as goetic magic, appealing to, in his words, the outcast, the incompetent, the ignorant, the lonely, people who can't find satisfaction through normal means.
Ouch, that's incredibly judgmental.
It is. It really highlights his critical stance. He seems to see these practices as born out of desperation or a flawed desire for power, rather than any genuine spiritual path.
Okay, quite a perspective from Jide. Let's shift gears now. Let's look at the Grimoire of Arthur Gauntlet. This one feels a bit different because there's a historical connection.
Yes, that's one of the really interesting things about it. The famous 17th century astrologer William Lilly actually wrote about meeting Arthur Gauntlet and looking through his magical books. He even mentions a woman, Sarah Skellhorn, connected to Gauntlet.
So these might have been real people actually using this stuff.
Exactly. Lilly's account gives it a historical anchor. He said Gauntlet's books contained rare notions. It adds this layer of, well, reality to it, suggesting these weren't just literary fantasies.
And the grimoire itself shows connections to other texts. You mentioned variations in spirit names.
Right, like Oberion in some texts becomes Ebrion in Gauntlet. Kabirion becomes Kabirion. This suggests these magical traditions weren't static. They were being copied, adapted, evolving over time.
Like a living tradition, almost.
In a way, yes. And there are potential links to another manuscript called the Book of Gold, possibly pointing back to an even earlier Latin source. The use of Greek Septuagint psalm numbering also hints at a complex textual history. It's like peeling back layers.
So what's in the Gauntlet grimoire? Is it similar to what Waite described?
It's a real mix, actually. You get general conjurations against evil spirits, invoking God's power.
Okay.
But also prayers calling on God, apostles, patriarchs, all sorts of celestial orders asking for help to command spirits using the name Adonai.
A blend of religious and magical language, then.
Very much so. There's even a Solomonic-style charm using sigils and divine names, including the initials JF and AG, maybe Arthur Gauntlet himself. It really exemplifies that blending, that syncretism you often see.
Does it have a different feel compared to, say, the Grimorium Verum?
It feels broader in some ways. It actually quotes the Book of Arbatel on prophetical magic, seeking divine revelation.
Which we also discussed, but maybe from a different angle.
Right, and then you get these aphorisms emphasizing loving God and your neighbor. That feels like a much more overt ethical or religious element compared to some of the more purely power-focused grimoires.
So not just about getting stuff.
Not entirely, but it definitely has the practical stuff, too. Instructions for calling good angels into a crystal stone for enlightenment.
Scrying, basically.
And then conjurations for very down-to-earth things. Getting stolen goods back, making someone fall in love, even opening locks. A real mix of the high-minded and the everyday.
That practicality is common in grimoires, isn't it? Solving immediate problems.
Absolutely. They weren't just for grand, complex rituals. They offered tools for the immediate needs and desires of the people using them.
Does Gauntlet's grimoire include that astrological timing aspect?
Yeah.
Planetary hours.
Yes, it lays out detailed considerations for working on specific days of the week. Each day has its ruling angel Michael for Sunday, Samael for Tuesday, Raphael for Wednesday, and so on. And it links them to seals, planets, zodiac signs, even specific angels of the air associated with that day. Like Sunday is Michael the Sun, Leo the angel Varkin, Tuesday is Samael, Mars, Aries Scorpio, the angel Carnavian. It's a whole system of correspondences.
Fundamental to a lot of Western magic, that framework.
Definitely. The idea is to tap into the right cosmic energies by working at the right time. And the grimoire provides specific conjurations for days like Tuesday and Wednesday, using the relevant divine and angelic names.
Any other interesting rituals described?
There's one for calling spirits from a book, specifically at a crossroads.
The crossroads again. Classic location.
Isn't it seen as a place between worlds? The ritual involves consecrating the book and repeating the conjurations 3 times, emphasizing persistence.
But what about the ritual space itself? Does it give details?
Oh, yes. It stresses needing a clean, consecrated space. An altar, candles, metal plates or pages with holy writings, fumigation with incense, anointing oil.
Sounds involved.
And even specific clothing for the operator, a white linen garment, and a mitre, like a bishop's hat, inscribed with the tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of God. It's all about creating a sacred, protected zone.
Does it mention necromancy, like Waite discussed?
It does talk about calling forth the souls of the dead, but the emphasis is slightly different. It suggests specific locations like churchyards or execution sites, places where souls might linger.
Okay.
And it mentions needing a part of the deceased's body, if possible, along with perfumes to attract the spirit, and using artificial lights with inscriptions, maybe to create the right atmosphere for manifestation.
A bit different from the other necromancy ritual.
A bit, yeah. It also describes calling a spirit into a crystal stone, scrying again to reveal truth. But it emphasizes the operator needs to be pure, using specific prayers or orisons.
And controlling the spirit once it's there.
There's a bond ritual for that. To compel the spirit to stay in the crystal and obey, invoking divine power and even the casting out of Lucifer as a show of authority.
It seems quite comprehensive. Anything else stand out?
Well, there's a specific conjuration to a fairy named Sibylla, which is interesting, expands beyond just angels and demons,
Right, the Fey folk.
and a very powerful, long conjuration, invoking dozens of divine names and attributes, demanding obedience, plus, sensibly, a prayer for protection against a spirit you've summoned. Always good to have insurance.
Definitely seems wise.
And finally, it includes a dismissal, a license to depart, warning the spirit of punishment if it disobeys, but allowing it to leave peacefully. It also has recipes for magical perfumes and even instructions for using specific psalms for things like healing or safe childbirth.
Using psalms magically.
Yeah, blending religious texts with magical aims, plus charms for love and influence. It really is a practical handbook covering a lot of ground.
Okay, so that's Gauntlet. Now let's bring in Aleister Crowley. His perspective feel like it's going to be quite different.
Oh, absolutely. Crowley takes us into a very different realm. He talks about the role of the magus, the accomplished magician, as being to manifest the beauty of the order, much more philosophical.
Manifesting order.
Through aligning with and enacting their true will. His system involves progressing through grades, like the Adeptus Major. Attaining that requires things like self-equilibration, balancing actions, maintaining silence about certain things, and enacting your true will symbolically, possibly on the Kabbalistic tree of life.
It sounds deeply personal, a path of self-transformation.
Very much so. It's about inner mastery, aligning your individual will with a perceived universal purpose. That's central to his philosophy, Thelema.
And his concept of the holy guardian angel. That seems key.
Absolutely fundamental. But he stresses that knowing and conversing with your HGA is a deeply personal, secret matter, not something to be shared lightly, or something others can find for you.
That's a huge contrast to the Grimoires trying to summon external named spirits.
Exactly. The HGA is more like a higher aspect of oneself, an inner guide, the source of true wisdom and magical power unique to the individual. It's an internal connection.
Crowley also mentions the magician's astral universe. What's that about?
It points towards a more subjective, psychological dimension of magic. The inner world, the imagination, the subconscious, that's a crucial arena for Crowley's magical work. It's shaped by the magician's own perceptions, a shift from focusing solely on external spirits.
And he provides his own versions of invocations.
Yes, like his version of the Bornless One invocation and the charge to the spirit. They have a very distinct, powerful, almost poetic style, ritual tools in his system.
How does he interpret the magic itself? Is it about inner power?
Largely, yes. He talks about the angel as the true self of the subconscious. He suggests that every breath, every word can be charged with the creative power stemming from that connection. It's about transformation from within.
And he includes specific techniques.
Definitely. Things aimed at strengthening the soul, you might say. Physical and mental discipline, breath control exercises, silently vibrating or muttering the angel's name. It's a very embodied practice.
Integrating body and mind.
Precisely. Common in many esoteric paths, using breath and focus to alter consciousness, access deeper states.
He also advises silence about some experiences.
Yes, he says some things are unlawful to utter. Reinforces that idea of deep personal secrecy, maybe experiences that are beyond easy explanation or could be misunderstood.
Many mystical traditions have that element of secrecy.
True. And he talks about how, as one gets more attuned to their angel, a sense of peace and clarity can emerge even within states of intense, passionate ecstasy, a kind of refinement of the experience.
Suggests a real transformative process.
Absolutely. He also provides these complex tables, like Table 4 in V, linking things like the ritual sword, the elements, the tree of life, zodiac signs, planets. It's this incredibly intricate symbolic web.
A whole cosmology laid out.
Exactly. Drawing from Kabbalah, astrology, alchemy, weaving it all into a system to map out the forces the magician works with.
Does he describe specific ritual actions too?
Yes, like using the Averse pentagram ritual to invoke earth and water, sometimes with the cry Therian, which was one of his magical names, and a specific posture called the sign of Vir, which is described as somewhat primal or animalistic.
Distinct elements of his practice.
Very distinct. Designed to manipulate specific energies or invoke archetypes within his thelemic framework. He even offers his own symbolic interpretation of tarot cards, like the Lust card, linking it to magical power and transformation in his specific way.
And more disciplines. You mentioned spinal breathing.
Yes, practices like spinal breathing and deliberately training oneself to resist both pleasure and pain. It's all about strengthening the will, developing self-mastery, transcending ordinary limitations to access deeper energy and awareness.
He even has that exercise for thinking backwards.
Right, the retrospective
Mhm.
exercise, training the brain to review the day in reverse. A really unusual technique aimed at breaking habitual thought patterns, maybe unlocking hidden memories or altering the perception of time itself.
Fascinating. And what about his overall view of magic?
He talks about magic being elastic, adaptable, and of course his central tenet, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, which is about discovering and living out your true will.
And divination. How does that fit in?
He sees divination, like tarot or astrology, as separate from magic itself, but interwoven. It provides strategic information, helps understand the playing field, but it doesn't perform the magic or enable the impossible on its own. It's a tool for guidance.
Okay, so we've covered Waite's critique, Gauntlet's practical plan, and Crowley's internal transformative path, bringing them together. What connections or contrasts really jump out?
Well, the historical lineage is clear, isn't it? The repeated references back to things like the Key of Solomon show that shared foundation, even across centuries.
Right, that name keeps popping up.
But then the perspectives are just worlds apart. You've got Waite's deep skepticism and moral critique.
Almost an outsider looking in, critically.
Exactly. Then the grimoires like Gauntlet offer this, practical toolkit for achieving specific goals, blending religion and magic.
Much more hands-on.
And then Crowley comes along with this highly individualistic, philosophical, psychologically focused system aimed at profound self-transformation and union with the divine, however he defined it.
So the purpose of magic itself is viewed completely differently.
Completely. Is it about controlling external spirits for gain? Is it accessing divine revelation? Is it about unlocking your own inner potential and true will? These sources give very different answers.
And the practices reflect that. The detailed hierarchies of demons and angels in the grimoires versus Crowley's intense focus on the personal holy guardian angel.
Precisely. The emphasis shifts dramatically from external entities to internal states, from complex ceremonial procedures involving many tools to practices focused on breath, will, and consciousness.
So for listeners hoping for those aha moments, maybe the takeaway is seeing both the threads that connect these traditions, like the old texts, and the really stark, fundamental disagreements about what magic even is and what it's for.
I think that's a great way to put it. And what's fascinating is that despite all these differences, all these sources tap into something deeply human, don't they? This enduring fascination with hidden realities, with power, with influencing the world in ways beyond the mundane.
That desire seems constant, even if the methods and philosophies change.
Exactly.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive then, we've journeyed through a pretty wide historical landscape of ceremonial magic. We've seen diverse rituals, entities, and maybe most strikingly, these really varied viewpoints on its value, its ethics, its purpose.
Hopefully it's given everyone a clear, maybe quicker path to understanding this complex material, highlighting some of those surprising connections and contrasts.
And maybe it leaves us all with a final thought to chew on. Thinking about the history, the different perspectives, what's the lasting significance of these practices? Even if you don't believe in the literal magic, what does his ongoing fascination tell us about human desires? About power, knowledge, meaning?
That's the big question, isn't it? What deep needs or aspirations do these practices reflect across cultures and centuries?
Something for everyone to ponder. We definitely encourage you, if anything sparked your interest, to delve deeper into the original books or related topics. As we've seen, it's a vast and complex field.
Always more to explore.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.